Vamos a arrancar con un overview, ¿tá?
Jessica just said we are going to start with an overview. So we are going to look at the main features of GeneXus 16, and then you will be able to go more in depth in each one of the subject matters. It's worth going deeper into most of them. As you know, the main pillars of GeneXus 16 concern the multi-experience. We know that the applications won't be purely mobile and web as they are today, but they will be available instead in more devices. So this version has been prepared for this purpose. And secondly, we are going to incorporate components with AI, artificial intelligence, which will help you to optimize processes through these solutions and support you when you have to make decisions. So these components may be added now to the solutions in GeneXus 16, and from then on, we will have solutions that will give more value to our users. So in a few words, that's GeneXus 16. On the one hand side, we have the solutions themselves, and on the other hand, we have the platforms, that is to say, how we build them. And all this is the box, that is to say, how we build them, and we have all the tools to build them. This is the solution that we will be developing, and which can have multiple components, as you see, and this implies again that we have to be careful with regard to security.
And also GeneXus has to have functionalities for integration.
All these kinds of solutions, and then operations which have to be taken into account. GeneXus has to help us publish those solutions. We want to follow a cycle of DevOps in the companies. That's a culture we want to encourage. And that's the path we want to travel. Automate everything that can be automated in GeneXus solutions. Many of your companies are starting to take up this culture. There are some young companies that are working in this manner, and now the right conditions are there so that we can all start to work along this cycle. We have here several stages, which are the ones that are going to guide us to look at GeneXus functionalities. So let's start with development. We are going to build a solution that, as I said, is omni-channel and multi-experience, and we will have to take into account security and integration concepts. Then we will see how we build and test them. Each one of the channels has a specific purpose. It's not that the web is going to solve everything, or that it's going to be purely mobile, or whichever trend you want to listen to. Actually, each one has a specific purpose, and the good thing about GeneXus is that we can create each one of these components for this purpose and have a solution that is much more encompassing. We have been giving more power or more facilities to the design in GeneXus, improving the user experience, adding chatbots, and each one of these points that we are going to see in more detail in a second. What are design systems made for? They are conceived so that we have multiple channels. I need consistency and a direction in my design. It can be that each one has a design that doesn't have anything to do with the others. So we have the design systems to achieve consistency, and they are a series of principles, patterns, and practices to achieve consistency. One of the design systems which is already integrated in GeneXus, for which there has been a special edition of GeneXus, is Fiori. What you see here is the following. Fiori is SAP's design system. So SAP explains what are the guidelines that should be followed for this design system. In GeneXus, we added patterns and subjects and objects, specifically so that there is automatic generation following these guidelines. We see here, for example, a Fiori split screen master list, and then there are 10 types of different views. And each one has its pattern or way of being built. But these are examples. With this level of detail, the buttons have to be down here, and here you should be able to surf backwards. Well, these are the guidelines of the design system. In GeneXus, we have new concepts in order to describe in a knowledge base the design system and generate codes from there. So we are going to get into details afterwards, and Federico Salomon will explain more. And then the improvement of the user's experience. This can be achieved with a flex grid. As you see, it's not that it's fixed in 12 columns. It's a responsive web design, so it's much more flexible, and each one of the components can be anchored in a part of the screen, and automatically, if you widen the screen, this component will be seen up here, and each one will be reordered. And if I see it in a narrower screen, then the components go down. And this is conceived for web and smart devices. This is a video of some of the applications that were made using the new concepts that were added to GeneXus from GeneXus 15 to GeneXus 16 with different functionalities: audio streaming, video streaming, the transitions, which you can govern. In GeneXus 2, there are animations, interactions with maps, and we will get into this subject more in depth later. This is integration with the device and everything that's face recognition and biometric controls for authentication. You can have components in your solutions that are specific for this purpose. The previous screen was a chat, and this augmented reality, which in itself is not integrated in GeneXus 16 yet, but you can add controls, external controls to it. And here you have animations. This is the format. It's a JSON. And the lot is, and you can define an animation and reproduce it. This was done specifically for China. 2 billion people use one of these two applications. So anyone who makes an application for China will have to integrate with these payment methods. This is an application to which other concepts were added. For example, several people betting against each other for the results of the World Cup. This is the application for the supermarket in Inglesa. It's in the store, and it's a retail application for Uruguay, through which you can buy, and other functionalities also were added since it required dynamism. All this has live editing, and that's why you can get that level of detail. Otherwise, we would get bored by setting properties and testing the results to see how they really look. The only way of having the time for this level of detail is live editing. And then The other point is conversational UI for conversational interfaces. We added, as you saw, potentialities in GeneXus to make chats, which are the basis for chatbots, that kind of interface. What's behind the interface is actually a connection with AI, specifically with the treatment of natural language. In this manner, we generate a model in GeneXus on the basis of an object, and in that GeneXus object, there are details of the flow of a conversation, and then GeneXus generates a model that goes to an engine that solves the natural treatment of language, and through the APIs the voice can also be interpreted, and then the text is interpreted by the engine. GeneXus applications have other components besides this, and in the chat we not only expect an interaction through the audio or the text, the chatbot can also respond to embedded screens, which are much richer. Explaining a graph is not only showing it to the chatbot, so it's another value that GeneXus adds, being able to show components that are embedded in the chat. And it shows the components, and it can also, with a graph, and can also show actions by authorizing, for example, a purchase or similar operations that may be required. We'll give you more details later. These are the maps, and it's possible to have multi-layered maps. We are going to add more layers, but the first ones that are already available is drawing a line in a map, or using a selector and moving the whole map until we choose the point and move the point to another place. But Javier La Rosa is going to tell you this in more detail. And then we've worked on giving more of powering analysis with a dashboard object. What you see here is a complete dashboard object. There is a web editor here, and we have been dragging query views and data providers that show the results in this manner. A dashboard object is a business dashboard that is used to show KPIs, key performance indicators. So each one of our solutions can have a dashboard like this one and show the KPIs. What the omni-channel has is two generators. It is included with the iOS generator. It's called iOS because it's generating for Apple Watch and Apple TV, which are two different operating systems. iOS for iPhone and iPad, but then TV OS is for Apple TV, and Watch OS is for Apple Watch. So in one generation, actually, we are generating for 3 languages, or 3 operational systems which are governed by the same language, which is Swift. This is the application of the event seen in the Apple Watch. Unfortunately, we are only at the beta stage of the application, and it's not been released to be available during the event. But this is how it's seen. There were notifications, and you can see the sessions inside the Apple Watch, the coming sessions. That's the functionality we had. And this is again a beta version of the application for Apple TV. As you see, you surf between the data with a cursor, you go up and down, or back and forth, and then you select a field and a component, and you click on buttons so as to watch something. This knowledge base is going to become public. We are working on it so that you can also see it as an example of how the whole events application was made. There are many components of user interface that can be analyzed by you and that you can replicate in your solutions. We have insisted on these feature. The second point with regard to integration, the novelty now is, well, this is cloud external storage that came with GeneXus 15. You can upload the images, for example, to a provider like Amazon, like this one, or any platform like Loomis. And what you could store here until now was images, videos, and audios, and GeneXus 16 allows you to have block file data. The block doesn't have all of the information, so that we can, in the field of a URL, go to the external storage. So we added the block file, which allows you to record in a storage provider or externally. So the recommendation is whatever you do new and whatever you can convert, start using block file instead of block, because it has more information and it will allow you at any point to go from storage provider or to go to storage provider, and this will facilitate the solution. And we can generate files direct in the storage provider so as to use the local file system as little as possible, the one in which the web application is running. And this for reasons of scalability. If we want to be executing containers, they have to be discardable. There is a basic image on the basis of which a container is created, but then if it scales, it may be that the container is destroyed and 5 more containers are created. So everything that is recorded locally has to be discardable, and we have to avoid saving files locally. The database is always outside, that's normal, but we have to try to handle the files outside. Contracts that you want to file inside the system, for example, in the storage. Not in a predetermined manner, but there are functions, the file type of data and the external storage, and with those two, any of the files can be saved externally. External storage has functions of upload and download file, and with those files, I understand that there will still be intermediate files, but with these two functions, you can upload it immediately to the S3. Otherwise, it goes to the website, and then you have to send it to storage with another process. Yes, but it's the same function. Once you saved it, then you use the type of data file and the external storage, and you upload it to the S3, and then you have the link, and with the link you continue processing it. It doesn't control the type of data. No, you upload any binary, whatever. We have added functions because these storage providers have like folders or buckets that can be private or public. And there are two different functions depending on how you want to treat the file, whether it's public or private. If it's private, afterwards it's going to give you a link that expires, or you ask the external provider to give you a link for that moment, and the moment may last 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 hour, whatever you want, so as to show afterwards the link in the browser and the user can click on it. But the link expires after a while. So it's external storage and types of data file. And then we added OData, which is a REST protocol through which it's possible to expose data models that by other providers as entities, and the entities can be modified. The interesting thing about GeneXus is that those services can be imported with an inspector, and after they are imported, they remain in GeneXus as transactions, data views. and there is a data store associated to this. Then you program for each, and you don't even realize that you're actually not doing a select on a database, but a call or a service to obtain those data. And then we are going to see this more in detail. We have added sockets and Kafka as mechanisms for bidirectional communication. This is used in chats applications inside the same application, and Kafka is used to communicate different applications. And there were improvements in one signal as a mechanism to send notifications. Then we added payment APIs, and we can add new ones to the ones you see on the screen for your respective regions if necessary. With regard to AI, the first step in GeneXus was to add methods to analyze images and text, process text and images and audio, for example, to translate, or to take the photo of a license plate. And the good thing in GeneXus is that it works well with these three providers, but we are going to add more in the future. What's the advantage of having it work for multiple providers? Well, maybe for you it will be convenient to use one or the other depending on the policies of your company. But also it may happen that a provider is better or more expert in one function and another one is better with regard to another function. For example, SAP may be good in speech to text, but IBM Watson can be better for detect faces. I don't know whether that's the case, just an example. So with the same code in GeneXus, you can try the various providers and keep the one that you find more convenient. We have added GeneXus for SAP systems as one more addition in GeneXus 16. It extends the SAP ERP, so you can inspect the extensibility points of SAP and doing applications that are integrated to the ERP itself. But also SAP has an engine of databases, so you can use SAP HANA DB as a data engine, as its own engine of databases for its own application, which you can then upload to SAP's cloud. And as I said, this edition of GeneXus has already a pattern included which follows the design guidelines of SAP. So if you are going to make an application for SAP, the more natural thing is doing this SAP edition, because the users that are using SAP, if they start using the tool that you built for them, that solution already follows the interface guidelines. You don't have to explain anything. They will know where to find the button, and it will feel very natural to work with the solution you make for them. Yes, it's a special GeneXus edition. Now, with regard to security, we have worked in data protection, sensitive data in the web, read-only variables, etc., and also with regard to smart devices, obfuscation of applications, and also offline encryption in order to reach the security required by banks. And with regard to GAM, we have added the possibility for you to define the GAM as an entity provider of any solution that fulfills the OAuth 2.0. So you can use the authentication for Mercado Libre or Instagram or similar ones. With regard to build,
There is something new with build in GeneXus, and this goes in the build menu, and there is a new option. But in this menu, you can define what things to do before and which things to do after build. For instance, executing a batch that can make an extra thing. This is for advanced users, right? But there you can define, and any definitions that you would put in there is like a hidden function at the environment level. And you can send it to the GX server. Everything will be integrated. So if you have to add any files from every build, you can do it, and the build will do it automatically. Apart from the generators, Apple Watch and Apple TV, the one we've added is this one, .NET Core.
Okay, es el mismo generador.net.
With the same license, it's the same .NET generator. Now, .NET Core is Microsoft's trend. These versions occur much more frequently than the .framework. There is a clear movement towards .NET Core. It's faster, installable, rapid, and it can also be run in Link.
Por ello, y para correr en contenedores, es la...
This is something to be used in containers. So whenever you can, please start moving towards .NET Core. This is the first version. I mean, these are the first versions of these 3 generations. That's what we've got. But with it's not working with all BMS in general, because we have to do some integration and testing.
It already works with MySQL, Postgre, and SQL Server.
In the wiki, we've written the list of functionalities which doesn't work. And you can follow the checklist and see whether that applies to your solution or whether it doesn't. If it does, then try it out and generate it. It would be good to have your feedback in the items that are missing, just in case we haven't realized that something wasn't there. But the list is quite complete, in fact, and we're going to start completing the rest. And then as regards testing, at the IDE and in a free way for any developer, you can add new unit tests, and you can execute it and try it out from the IDE. So that functionality was developed for Abstract, but it goes in the IDE GeneXus. So please start creating unit text for procedures, data providers, and business components. Then Abstracta is working on a new version, GXTest 4. I think it's going to be ready by November. And that GXTest 4 will be ready by November, and it goes together with the GeneXus Leader. But it's good to automate tests from the UI, and this is for unit tests. Now, as regards operations, we have worked in deploy, including deploy for serverless environments, containers, and then we have some new APIs, configuration management.
To read the web config or the client CFG file.
You can read all the configurations that at present are being used. And then, apart from that, the configuration can be read through environment variables. If these variables are active, or you have got some variables active in that environment, and they've got a special name, so GeneXus will read it immediately on the basis of those environment variables. Well, perhaps in client F6 you have certain configurations, but in production you have to configure others. And so,
before loading the container or the environment,
or the container of production, in the configuration environment, you would set up environment variables, and those would be taken into account without having to repackage the solution with other client FG or having to modify it. And then something to improve logging or even to improve monitoring is that we've got an API. I'm sorry, this is written here with a back variable. You write log.info, log.warning on whatever, depending on the data log.
In order to save on the log.
Well, in .NET, you would record it in .NET, and here you're also going to have it .log, or in the place you specify through properties, and you can govern it with different properties when the console, client log, or it's going to be sent elsewhere. And then when you are in a certain environment and you want to release or you want to integrate the full code, and you usually have a computer, and that computer starts doing build, and it starts compiling and perhaps putting in production. Now, all those steps together with tests must be governed somehow. It's not that it only does updates, build on, and it moves it up to production. But if there is a test step and the test fails, then I don't have to go up to production. Now, all that control is done with a Jenkins tool for pipeline control, and we've got an integration with Jenkins in GeneXus 16. In Jenkins, you specify the GeneXus server that you're going to be using, and you configure everything there. And then apart from GeneXus 16, the entire suite is ready. GeneXus Server and BPM, each one has new functionalities. I'm not going to go into that. But GeneXus Server has improved performance and some minor issues. And in BPM, we worked on the scalability of GXFlow, the performance of GXFlow.
GXFlow can also be run as a service in platform environment.
Very well. That's an overview of what we've worked on in GeneXus 16. The idea is that you can develop what you've got with GeneXus 16, but we also know that perhaps, the system must be kept next year or the following year, and so there you'll need GeneXus to keep it. And not only GeneXus 16 as it is now, because in 2 or 3 years we may have other protocols that we don't even know now. So we are building GeneXus in that way so that you can evolve together with GeneXus. That is, the solution that just started today with GeneXus 15 perhaps is developed with GeneXus 16 and then 17 and so on. So we are quite careful about compatibility and about the fact that we can easily adopt versions, because we know that that's an ongoing work, developing and creating solutions. So that's the main issues that I wanted to share with you about GeneXus 16.